What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Anthony Sain Show. This is your host, of course, Anthony Sain, here with a very special guest today. Got my man, your man, Devine. Dan Devine is in the building. Yahoo Sports, the Big Number Podcast. Dan, welcome to the show, brother.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. Always good to join the good people of Memphis.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I used to listen to you a lot with my guy, Gary Parrish. Used to come on with him often
That's
here in Memphis. Yeah.
I'll come on whoever has me on in Memphis, man, but I'm happy to be here with you today.
Yeah, for sure, man. We definitely appreciate you coming on. You've been a guy who, one of the national guys who's really had a pretty fair commentary when it comes down to the Grizzlies. You pretty much give, and I like you because you really give a lot of optimistic things, and you find a way to pull out a lot of things that we don't even notice about our team often. So that's definitely why I want to bring you on the show. Well, Dan, let's go ahead and get into it, man. Let's get the big stuff out of the way, man. The Grizzlies are third in the West right now. They've kind of struggled against good teams. They've been pretty much a 500 team, around 500 against teams in the Western Conference. Do you see them as legit title contenders coming out of the West, and why do you see it that way?
I think you've got to consider them a serious contender at this point because they're in that mix of we're one of the top 5, 6 teams on both sides of the ball, right? When you get to
Mm-hmm.
playoff defense, playoff offense, you need to be able to stop really good teams. You need to be able to unlock really good teams. That's been the issue for Grizzlies teams past, right? That half court offense. Do you
Mm-hmm.
have enough ability to put other defenses to a decision point and find ways to penetrate and create against them? This new offensive structure that the Grizzlies have been playing through this year, where it's so much fluidity, so much motion, not as much pick and roll, a lot more cutting off the ball. It seems like it's working gangbusters for the most part. And so I think that's going to be something that even some of the better defenses you'll face will need some time to get acclimated to. That's means some of the elite defenses that you might see, Houston Rockets being one of them. Obviously, the Grizzlies have had a little bit of a hard time there. Physicality can be an issue with that if it's a timing-based or sort of fluidity-based system, but that might be true for no matter who we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about. I don't think that's a Grizzlies-specific problem. And you still have that big three of Ja Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., who I believe Jaren Jackson Jr. has leveled up this year. I feel like he
Mm-hmm.
deserves to be at All-Star Weekend. I'm not sure he's going to make it in on the starters ballot, but I believe he deserves to be there. I believe the coaches will see the same thing. And Desmond Bane, you just haven't had, has been the issue for years and years now. There haven't been that much time of those three guys together on the court. Just under 300 minutes for that big three together so far this season. But they've been crushing people when they've had them on the court. They're scoring like gangbusters. They are getting stops. It's to me, it's when you get to the playoffs, it's about are your stars at that top level. It's the depth that gets you through the regular season winds up mattering a little bit less in a postseason series. And for what I've seen, when those big three guys are together, the Grizzlies got about as good a shot as anybody, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, Dan, I'll be honest with you. I'm not a Taylor Jenkins guy. It kind of comes and goes. Right
Okay.
now, today, I'm not a Taylor Jenkins guy, and I know that you pay attention to the Grizzlies, but I know the intricacies of why our fans may not be fans of Taylor Jenkins.
Sure.
It's kind of rotations and all these type of things. We just kind of do a lot of things that come off as weird as far as, but every fan complains about the rotations, right? But for every team, right? So, but one thing I kind of stand on a lot is that most of the time, if you look at NBA history, the guy that started with a young team is not the guy that finishes with that team.
Right.
And Taylor Jenkins adds even more lack of probability to it because not only did he start with these guys, but that was his first coaching job, is here with the Grizzlies. And most times you don't see a guy get to finish the story. You know what I mean? You don't see a guy start with a team and finish it. Somebody else normally comes in and do it. Am I overthinking it, or do you think there's something to why Taylor Jenkins might not be the guy strictly because of how league history goes?
You think he's got to go down to the hustle and then come back to the main roster like Cody? You think that's what's going on there? Not to say that AEW is the G League.
Right.
The point that I would say is, I think that you're probably right that you run out of options at a certain point. You reach the end of the road, and sometimes that road comes up more quickly. I wonder if for Taylor Jenkins, it doesn't come up so quickly because of just the kind of the wild nature of the last 2 seasons in Memphis, with all the injuries, with the jaw suspension stuff, with the recent into entering this season, the dramatic retrofitting of the coaching staff, which again so far seems to have paid dividends. So I wonder if some of that kind of resets the clock a little bit. But you're right that the examples are there. Whether it's Phil Jackson taking over in Chicago, or even in the who remains to be seen where how far this team goes. But we saw going from JB Bickerstaff to Kenny Atkinson kind of unlocked a new level for the Cavaliers this year. Steve Kerr taking over from Mark Jackson in the past. There are examples of a fresh set of eyes, having a new perspective on things that can unlock a team. But I do wonder if doing what Jenkins did with the coaching staff and sort of deciding we're going to retrofit the way that we play offense, because that's been the problem. The problem hasn't necessarily been in defensive series that they couldn't get enough stops or that they couldn't go toe-to-toe with these teams. It's could you score enough against a set defense? It remains to be seen whether the way they do it right now will hold up in round 2, round 3 of the playoffs. But I think if it doesn't, we get to that point and we find out that the answer is no, and that some of the same problems that have been there are the same problems we see again. Zach Edey having a struggle with the quickness of the game, or there's not enough size when you take him off the floor, or Jaren can't rebound at the 5, or Ja can't get all the way to the rim. There's not enough shooting on the perimeter, and so on and so on. If the problems are the same, then the solution might need to be different. But I think all you can do is go with what they've shown on film so far this season, and you're back to a top 5 offense that looks different, that feels different, that's creating different problems with everybody sort of feeling good. So I think so far I would hold off on that, but I think you're probably right that the end of that road might come sooner than you think if the problems wind up looking similar.
Right. I'm a big fan of your show, The Big Number, right? And I was watching a particular episode, and man, you're just going off like you're like pro Zach Edey, and I'm like, oh man, this guy's speaking my language. He sees it the way I see it. And then you started like dropping stats like something about Zach Edey when he boxes out, the Grizzlies get the rebound 100% of the time. I'm like, all right, man. Like, I don't even know how you know that. All right, shout out to that. You know what I mean? And you're doing a lot of Zach Edey stuff that just had me hyped, right? I'm like, okay, this guy sees it the way I see it, right? But Zach Edey was averaging 11 and a half points, 10 and a half rebounds in December. So far in the month of January, he's like doing half of that, right? He's at 4.9 points and 5.7 rebounds in January. What do you think has led to that? And do you think the Grizzlies are actually maximizing him? Do you think they're using him in the best way?
The answer to the second question is probably no, but I also think that's kind of by design. I think if you're running a rotation this deep that has 3-4 guys you feel comfortable putting in at the 5, you don't necessarily want to go all in on the kind of curious fit 7'4" dude who sometimes has issues with fouling too, right? Like I think some of the issue that we're talking about is you get into early foul trouble. He's averaging 2.5 fouls in less than 18 minutes a game. And an example like when they played Charlotte the other night has, runs into some of those problems early, right? And so there's, if you don't get into a rhythm early, if you wind up sitting on the bench early, the team takes off when Brandon Clark comes in, or the team is looking great, with Triple J and then Santi Aldama up front, like the combinations there, it could wind up being that he just doesn't get back into the flow, or it's hard to get back to him in that way. We've seen that Edey can be a real force when you establish him early, but I also think that what the Grizzlies have seen so far in terms of the way the overall ecosystem works doesn't necessarily make sense to force feed that, I think. So there are going to be matchups where you desperately need that size. There's going to be matchups where he allows you to impose a style on the opposition. And I think the fact that we've already seen so many positives from him in terms of the way he impacts on the offensive glass, in terms of the way you can dump the ball down to him and just trust that he's going to get that half hook to go. Those are really, really good things to see from the start of it. And then also just not for nothing, he doesn't look out of place running, right? He doesn't look like he can't play the speed game with the rest of the Grizzlies. It's just that there's a lot of other answers. Like, again, not to go over index on that Hornets game, but there are like 11 dudes on the Grizzlies that would be the third best player on the Hornets. You look at the opportunities that are there for so many guys to impact the game in different ways. And you wonder if that can be a reason why maybe Zach Edey doesn't get established quite so much. So it might not be maximizing what he could be and what he will be down the line. But I think in terms of what they are asking him to do, what they need from him at this point, they've gotten a lot out of him. And he certainly seems to fit in what the Grizzlies are at this point in the structure.
Well, Zach Edey's had a pretty much up and down rookie campaign, but another rookie we have is Jaylen Wells, who's had a tremendous season, like big time defender. He can knock down shots. He's tough, mentally strong, all those type of things. What are your thoughts on Jaylen Wells? And also, what is his ceiling? The Grizzlies are a team who we've chased after the OG Anunobys, the Mikal Bridges, those type of guys over the years. Do you think we may have particularly drafted one of those type of guys in the Jaylen Wells, a 6'8" guy who can defend and knock down the three?
I mean, the starting kit is right there, right? Like the toolbox that you want, where it's not just you can defend those guys, it's you defend them well. It's not just you can knock down 40% in an open gym. He's hitting those shots with contests. So whether he reaches the heights of those guys who are maybe never going to be all-stars, but earn themselves a heck of a lot of money down the line with their ability to be that 3-and-D player. The fact that he can walk into the NBA and look ready, and that again, goes back to that point of not over asking, not saying we need to get you playing 38 minutes a game and we need to be force feeding you 15 shots a game. Get in where you fit in. And that has been, I mean, going back to, you know, the Zebo and Gasol and Conley days and saying, like, who fits in the middle, right? Where you're trying to always find the connective piece. And is it Rudy Gay? And is it this guy? Is it that guy? Is it Chandler Parsons? It was not Chandler Parsons. You know, who's it going to be in the middle connecting those dots? The possibility that you could find a player like that in the second round of the draft who just plug and play and everything flows, you know, Ja and Desmond Bane then don't have to be pick up the number one perimeter scorer. There's somebody else to do that. There's always an outlet space in the floor in the corner. He knows exactly where to be. He's good at cutting. He's smart getting to the rim. When he goes and attacks the offensive glass, he can go and get it. He fits in exactly with what this Grizzlies team needs. And so in terms of what his ceiling can be, I'll be honest, I didn't think he was going to come in and do anything like this personally. So putting a ceiling on him at this point feels premature, because if you can be a player of consequence on a team with real championship aspirations this early in the career, I mean, the jury's very much still out as far as how high you can go.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. You mentioned Jaren Jackson Jr. earlier in the season he's having. You mentioned him being an all-star. I agree. He won't be a starter, but there's no way the coaches leave him off of that roster or whatever. But do you see a All-NBA season even for Jaren Jackson Jr.?
Oh man, I don't got to write that column for a few months, so I'm gonna hold up. But when you think about those kind of players, right? What you're talking about is somebody who impacts the game at an elite level on both ends of the floor.
Right.
And that's been the issue with Jaren at points throughout his journey to this place, right? He comes into the league and he's that unicorn stretch guy, right? He's shooting at a high volume, high efficiency, but the defense wasn't quite there yet. Then gets hurt, has to spend most of the season on the shelf, comes back. The defense is through the roof. The shot's not quite there. Last season, you have all the injuries. He winds up having to create a ton, just be more of a put the ball in his hands and he's got to go get it. And while also still holding together a near top 10 defense with all those, missing pieces around him. And so I think what you're seeing now is the result of all of the roller coaster ride, the ups and the downs, where you feel good throwing the ball to Jaren Jackson Jr. in the post and saying, go eat, go take that dude. You can back him down to the rim and lay it up. You feel good with Jaren Jackson Jr. running either end of a screen and roll. You feel good with Jaren Jackson Jr. running off screens, catching the ball and making a decision to attack in isolation, get downhill, or pulling up from deep. And you certainly feel good, and you feel better now than maybe you ever have before with him guarding the yard at the 5, feeling really comfortable that, yeah, the rebounding might not be quite as elite as when you have a Steven Adams or a Zach Edey on the floor next to you, but he can be that defender. He can be that guy helping and then recovering to protect the rim and clear it up. I think we're seeing the best version of Jaren Jackson Jr. right now because he's having that impact on winning on both ends of the floor at an elite level. And if the Grizzlies continue to be in that range for the 2 seed, the 3 seed in the West, high 50 win or mid 50, high 50 win total, and he's been that integral part of it where he's the rock solid piece. He's the one that it's not missing time. He's playing a ton of minutes and he's having that impact. He's certainly going to be in the mix for one of those 6 forward spots come the end of the year.
Well, you were talking earlier about the Grizzlies and the depth that we have, right? And you have a team who just got G.G. Jackson back, still hasn't gotten Vince Williams back. Marcus Smart is coming back soon. With those guys coming in and just kind of assuming that Zach Edey, I'm going to assume that Zach Edey is going to get things together but by the time the playoff goes. But do you think, with that being said, do you think the Grizzlies need to make any type of move at the deadline? And if so, what type of move do you see them making?
Yeah, so need is probably not the word. I mean, Zach Kleiman and that front office have they know better than me, and they've made an awful lot of good choices in terms of who to keep, who to move, when to make those decisions, and then what kind of talent to bring in and prioritize. If it was me, I would look at what I feel comfortable looking at it and saying, we've got an excellent base on both sides of the floor. We feel super confident in our big 3. We feel really comfortable with a lot of the pieces that we can bring in and mix and match lineups. I would love another big shooter. And there's no team in the NBA that doesn't want another guy who can knock down 40% from the field and can shoot over the top, right? Everybody wants that guy, especially if that guy can defend. And that's why, as you mentioned, OG Anunoby talks, Mikal Bridges talks. Those guys also wind up making a boatload of money, and they're not always easy to get in the door. So Jaylen Wells has been phenomenal. If I could get a veteran who I might feel a little more comfortable saying that guy's been in the playoffs before. That guy's seen some big moments. To me, I love the idea of Cam Johnson out of Brooklyn.
Mhm.
And there, I think there's reasonable arguments to be made. How much of an upgrade is he over some of the other players that are on the roster at this point? But the idea of 6'7", 6'8" wing, can switch, can guard his yard, high volume, high efficiency 3-point shooter who has made strides off the bench and has also been, off the dribble rather, and has been a rotation player on a team that made the finals. Not the end all be all, not saying that guys who haven't been that far can't go that far, any of those types of things. But to me, if I'm looking at it and I'm saying I'm the Grizzlies, we know that they've been in the market for some more help on the perimeter before. We know they went down the road with Dorian Finney-Smith with the Brooklyn Nets. We know they've been heavy in the market on OG and McHale before. If it's a couple of picks and matching salary to be able to, again, from that depth and that war chest on the roster, to be able to add another guy that you feel good about going to war in a postseason, that to me, that would be awfully enticing. But, again, Zach Kleiman and that front office, they make a lot more money than me to make decisions tougher than me. So
Right.
they might look at that and say, if it's 2 picks, that's, the cost of doing business. Maybe discretion is the better part of valor because we know how well the Grizzlies draft and what the talent they're able to bring in from the draft. But to me, that would be an awfully enticing piece. That big wing shooter who can guard. Tough to find those guys, and they're worth their weight in gold when the games matter most.
When you look at the Zach Edey situation, is there any concern about him being ready for the playoffs? I said I think he'll be fine, but I'm not saying that 100% certainty. Like, what do you think that just because of some of the up and down play we've seen from him, and with the fit is still questionable with him, do you think that there's any concern? What's your concern level about him being ready for the playoffs?
Yeah, to me, it's mostly matchup dependent, right? I think that's the issue when you get into basically every postseason. It's going to, if you are dealing with a team that's got that beef up front, you're going to need somebody to help. If you're a team that's elite on the offensive glass, you're going to need somebody to try to box some people out, clear the runway. If you're dealing with a team that maybe is a little bit smaller, you could look at that as a pro or a con. Maybe having Edey on the floor as somebody that can punish those smaller lineups, maybe there's a value there. But if it's smaller, faster, more spread, maybe that's a dangerous spot for him to be in on the defensive end. My level of concern, I think, is a little bit lower because of the Grizzlies having more options for how to play. If they were saying we need this guy for 32 minutes a game every night, otherwise we're cooked, that I think to me would be a larger cause of concern. But the Grizzlies, what's made them so special this season and at multiple iterations during this run is they've got other ways to win. They've got multiple ways to make you hurt. And Zach Edey's certainly been one of them. But if he's not at that level in a playoff series, I got a lot of confidence in John, Triple J, and Bane and the group to find another way to make the defense hurt too.
Is there a particular guy that you think that we're not really hearing? Like, you have guys that you talked about the entire trade deadline, like guys that you think will be moved. Is there a guy that you think might be a surprise name as far as the trade deadline goes? A guy that could be on the move that we're not really thinking about right now?
To be honest with you, and this is a boring answer for television, but no, I don't think so. I think that there's a likelihood that the moves that get made at the deadline wind up being more about accounting than about, big swings for a lot of teams. Because, you've got, I think it was like a half dozen teams within $5 million or so of the luxury tax line. You've got teams that are thinking about aprons and repeater taxes and being on the right side of the luxury tax payout where they get the money in as opposed to sending it out. I can see some names like that or some moves like that being made, but I think that the number of big ticket items going out the door, there's constantly conversation about Jimmy Butler. That seems like it's going to require Bradley Beal to say yes to go someplace, and how incentivized he is to do that remains to be seen. Those things are awfully complicated to make work. And then a lot of, they draw in a lot of sort of smaller names along the way. But in terms of big names that are sort of haven't been talked about much, I would be surprised. I think a lot of the teams that are really good, that feel like they know what they've got, are not going to be willing to upset the apple cart too much because they feel like they're close. And as good as OKC has looked, as good as Cleveland has looked, as significant as Boston was this past year, I think if you get to the end, that for those last 5-6 teams, you feel like you're pretty good, you're probably not going to want to throw a good money after bad on it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Dan, I appreciate you coming on today, man. Great Grizzlies insight, of course. Wild trade deadline to come, and this Jimmy Butler stuff is just making it look ridiculous. You know what I mean? It's wild, man. It's really wild, for sure. But Dan, I appreciate you coming on, sharing good insight about the Memphis Grizzlies like you always do. Appreciate you coming on. This is my guy, Dan Devine of Yahoo Sports, and also the Big Problem Podcast. You can check that out. we're about to take a break. For our people who are watching on Fox 13, you guys know you can go watch the rest of the show on YouTube. And for everybody else, we'll see you guys back in a minute with more of the Anthony Sain Show.
But you look at the 21 team, the 22 team, the 23 team. A lot of times you'll see Memphis go on long winning streaks and then multiple games in a row losses, right?
Yeah.
Like last year, they won 3 conference games and then lost 4. Then they won 3 and then they lost 3.
How many times have we called Memphis seasons roller coasters? Because they take those swings, like you said, like they'll win 3 really good games and then they'll drop a couple just inexcusable.
The things that plagued them in the Temple game, they fixed in the Charlotte game, and they beat another team on the road in a conference where it's landmine season, landmine game after landmine game. They righted the ship rather quickly comparatively to other Tiger teams.
Tune into On the Bluff with Christian Fowler and Gabe Kuhn every Tuesday at 12 p.m. on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
I'm freaking sick and tired of the metrics. Metrics. You know what I'm saying? The metrics are ruining college basketball, and I think we need to do away with them. I know I'm one of the ones that's always looking at them, and I can't help it. But it's because the damn things are updated every single night. If a team went out there and won every single game this year by 1 point, their metrics would be shit, but they would be the national champion. We have a good resume, and we're going to get hurt down the stretch because we're not beating teams by 20 plus. And I think that that's stupid.
College basketball, very specifically, is quite unpredictable.
TJ,
you get these weird runs, dude, and this stuff happens all the time. So when people mention Kim Palm, I'm like, okay, you can use it sometimes, but you can't. It can't be your Bible for a lot of this stuff.
The metrics,
you can't use it that way.
And these dorks and these computers are trying to make college basketball make sense. And that's the beauty of college basketball, is it doesn't freaking make sense.
Tune in to Tigers Untapped with your hosts, Trey Lasley and TJ Willis, every Tuesday at 3 p.m. on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
All right, y'all. Welcome back to the Anthony Sain Show. Great interview with my guy, Dan Devine, man. Good stuff from him. He really looks at the Grizzlies a lot. And I know that he I'm not gonna say he's a Grizzlies fan, but I know he's a fan of a lot of stuff that we do.
Well, you can tell when you talk to national guys or you hear national guys talk about the Grizzlies, you can tell within like 1 or 2 sentences if they've actually
watched games,
the Grizzlies play. And it's clear Dan does. So it was good hearing his thoughts on it. But hey, I gotta tell you, brother, this is your flu game, man. I'm so proud of you right now, bro.
I'm sick as a dog. Yeah, I'm sick as a dog, man, for sure. Dan definitely has the FanDuel sports app for sure. He's definitely watching the Grizzlies on FanDuel. He ain't just watching national TV games. But yeah, man, I'm sick as a dog again. But we will push through this for sure. Something I want to talk about. DeMichael Cole had an article that he wrote about Zach Edey.
Yep.
And how the Grizzlies are using them and not using them. And basically the synopsis that I took from that is that with Jaren on the team and things that Jaren's trying to do, they're trying to find ways to get Jaren going with Zach Edey on the court offensively. They're trying to get Edey going with Jaren offensively. I get all those type of things, but we saw Zach have really good play and Jaren's having really good play at the same time.
Yeah.
I don't get it. I'm a little concerned about that whole thing because if all those things are true, then why did you draft Zach Edey? You should have drafted another guy. You know what I mean? Right. So I'm concerned about all those type of things for sure. But I'm not really too stressed out about it. Like I said, I think he'll be fine by the time the season comes around. Yeah. Zach has a lot of individual development he has to go through as well. His hands are really bad. He's as far as just catching passes and also his tap outs he's doing on offensive rebounds just aren't doing what he needs those to do, what we need those to do. So he's got to take his own accountability for sure on some of the things that he's struggling with. Good to see. Go ahead.
I think it's we sometimes forget. You look at the body of Zach Edey and you go 7'4", 300-pounder, biggest guy in the league, pretty much. There's certain things he does really well, right? And I think that we have discussed, and we've talked about this. Like, you had a whole podcast about this, a whole episode talking about chasing Rudy Gay, right? Like chasing the Rudy Gay player. And a lot of the reason why is because we were convinced and told by people that Zach Randolph and Rudy Gay couldn't work together, right? And so they let a 20-point per game, 6'9" phenom go, right? And I wonder if this is Taylor Jenkins, and this is glass half full on my part. But I'm wondering if this is Taylor Jenkins' effort to figure out how to expand a kid who's only played for 6 years, 7 years, only touched the ball, giving him an opportunity to work with one of the best power forwards in the game, and be able to play them both at the same time, because defensively you can see what they can do. You see what they can do together. It's how does it work on offense, right? Like, how does it work on the offensive side of the floor? And I can appreciate some of the things that Taylor said in there. He said, basically we're trying to get him comfortable doing other things than what he did at Purdue, right? Like, you saw him at Purdue, it was literally just post him up in whatever block he wants and then just let him pass out or one step to the rim, get fouled, whatever it was. This is a different situation than Purdue, right? Like, he's got Ja Morant, he's got Desmond Bane, he's got Jaren Jackson Jr., right? Like, he's got to fit within the system of those big three. And so I can appreciate that it looks ugly right now. It looks tough right now. But I think maybe they're thinking kind of like 2 to 3 steps down the line, 2 years down the line of, we want this to work long term, not just make Zach Edey look really good right now, because does that actually help the team right now?
Yeah, I get all those things for sure. But let's go back to something that Dan talked about in the beginning of the show, when he said that as far as the trade deadline.
Yeah.
I can see, of course, I would love to wake up and Cam Johnson's on my team. I don't think that's actually going to happen, but I think that's something I would love to happen. I really don't think the Grizzlies are going to do anything.
Yeah.
Like, I think they're going to just kind of roll with what they got. Yeah. But do you think they need to go get a big man though? Like, what do you think?
I'll be frank with you. If this is what they wanted out of Zach Edey, they probably should have gotten Khalil Ware, right? Yeah. Like, they probably should have gotten, a guy who's perfect out of that dunker spot, right? That duck in dunker spot. Do I think they should go get one now? I don't know who's out there that elevates them right now. Who's out there that elevates them? I don't know. I've not heard. I know Daniel Gafford's name has been mentioned. I think you've done the numbers, and I don't think it works, right? Like, I don't think the Grizzlies can make it happen. I think Daniel Gafford would be great, but I don't know. I don't know who. Like, I think I would have to know names first before I say yes. Like, this is who I would go and go after. I don't know.
What about your boy in Brooklyn? I can't think of his name. Claxton, yeah.
I mean, haven't we discussed him for years? I mean, like, I think that he would be. I think if you, it's funny. Like, you listen to what Taylor said, or you read what Taylor said to DeMichael in that article. It seems perfect, right? Like, it seems like that's the kind of player that you're looking for. You're looking for a Nick Claxton, a Khalil Ware, even a Donovan Clingan type of player, like guys like that. So yeah, I mean, like, if you can make it work, but I don't know, man. I think the financials are too much on that. I think the Nick Claxton stuff is too much, right? Like, isn't he didn't he get paid way too much?
I think he's getting paid like $20 million, something like that. Something. I think you could do a Marcus Smart trade for him straight up, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, but it's gonna be an interesting trade deadline, man, for sure. What do you think about Desmond Bane? He's been really playing good ball here lately. I want to say he scored 20 points in like 8 straight games or something like that. But he's back. He's definitely back for sure.
I just appreciate, like, I think you're I can't say the actual phrase. You're the Nostradamus of this place, man. Like, you're the Nostradamus. Like, you called it during the play-in. Like, obviously we would love, or not the play-in, but the in-season tournament. Like, we would love to have seen the Grizzlies play in Las Vegas, right? But Desmond has been great since that kind of 2-week vacation that they got during that time period. He played a couple of games. I think they played 3 games in 2 weeks. And so he got a chance to get that oblique right. He got a chance to kind of get back into shape. Like, he got a chance to, like, rest and recover from all those injuries. And Desmond has been playing great. I think there's still, a little bit out of control type of, dribbling sometimes. Like he is a very lucky dribbler, right? Like he dribbles the ball, loses it, and it just bounces right back to his arms. Like it's crazy, like how many times that happens. But nah, man, he is very clearly kind of back to what Desmond Bane was over the last couple of years for the Grizzlies. And I think a lot of folks panicked and got out of there real quick on Desmond too quickly. But you said something last night, and you said something on Twitter last night I got to talk to you about. You said there was a lineup out there in the game. It was
Jaylen Wells, Gigi,
Jaren, and
Edey.
Zach. And you said future starting lineup.
Yep.
Brother, there's a name missing there, man.
I know it is. Desmond Bane is the name. I don't know why people when people start talking about Dez coming off the bench, I don't understand why people take that as a insult or a downgrade to Dez. Right now, he's your secondary ball handler. Like right now, when John's not in, Dez has pretty much been on the ball.
Right.
Scottie Pippen is too, but I don't think Scottie Pippen plays in the playoffs. So Dez has pretty much been your guy who's on the ball. When they keep John and Jaren on the court, and they'll do this Dez thing when he's playing at the one. I think the best version of this team in a couple of years is going to be whatever Gigi is going to be in a couple of years, whatever Jaylen Wells is going to be, and those two guys being your 2 and your 3.
Yeah.
So you've got a big rangy guy, a 6'10" wing in Gigi Jackson, a 6'8" shooting guard in Jaylen Wells who can defend the other guy. And you don't have two guys that are a liability on defense in your backcourt in John and Desmond Bane. And then Dez can still be your sixth man and your closer. He still can close games, but not particularly start games.
You've said it. It's the Manu Ginobili role, right? It's that Manu Ginobili. Like ain't nobody gonna say that Manu wasn't one of the top 3 players on that Spurs run.
If he wasn't the second best doing that run.
Right.
For sure. Yeah, and I don't think it matters whether he starts or not. I think he can really contribute just kind of being that guy with the second unit and just kind of going off.
To me, it's the defense.
With the way that we sub, man, I mean, how long are we talking about before he comes into the game? 4 minutes?
3-4 minutes.
I mean, yeah. So, yeah, it's not really that big of a deal.
To me, it's the defense. Jalen's defense is what?
He's elite, bro.
Elite. He's elite. Like, and that to me is a raising of the ceiling for the Grizzlies more than anything else. Like, than anything I've seen so far. Jaren, I think, obviously raises the ceiling. Him playing the way he's playing raises the ceiling for the Grizzlies, puts him in that upper tier champion echelon. But having a guy like Jaylen Wells, who is literally like right now, he's not being discussed as it because he's a rookie and he was a second-round draft pick and all that. But having a guy who literally is you put him on the floor, he is what. This is going to sound crazy. I'm going to get roasted for this. I've heard for years how great of a defender Paul George is. And I'm sure he is. I'm sure Paul's a great defender. Jaylen Wells' defense in the next few years will become that conversation of he can shoot the ball like Paul George and he can defend like Paul George. Does that make sense? Am I wrong for that? Am I crazy for that?
I think what Jaylen Wells is, like Dan Devine said, I don't really think we have a ceiling for how good he can be because those type of guys do really well. Those kind of guys have high value in the NBA. You drafted one in the second round. So I think that's so you have to tip your hat to that for sure.
And yet they got Alexander Sarr top of the
I don't pay too much attention to that. That's one guy's vote. That's one guy writing articles, and he's got to making a conversation piece. I mean, that guy doesn't determine who the rookie of the year is. It's true. So I don't really put too much into that at all. Kenny, it's been a good one, man. Shout out to our man Dan Devine, who came and joined us today. And yeah, been a good show, man. We will see you guys next week, and we out.
Thank you for listening to the Anthony Sain Show. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a rating and a review wherever you download your podcasts. Also, like and subscribe to Bluff City Media's YouTube page. For comprehensive coverage of Memphis sports, head over to www.bluffcitymedia.co and find out how you can become an insider. We will see you back here next week.